Hi, I'm Dave Essinger, General Editor of the AWP Intro Journals Project. This contest invites nominations from AWP member programs every fall for student work in poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction. Winners are placed for publication in prominent journals including, this year, the Colorado Review, Puerto del Sol, Reed Magazine, Tampa Review, Hayden's Ferry Review, Mid-American Review, Iron Horse Literary Review, and Quarterly West. This year's judges were Karen Crago for poetry, Athena Dixon in creative nonfiction, and Mary Grimm in fiction. And tonight's reading will feature 5 of this year's award winners in this order. Danielle Harms, Anne Standlee, Steven Vineis, Hee Lee, and Jonathan Winston Jones. Would like to thank all of the participating journals, AWP's Director of Publications, Supriya Bhatnagar, Director of Communications, Juanita Lester, and Marketing Coordinator, Miranda Gonzalez, who's doing our recording tonight. So thanks for being here, everybody. So Danielle, do you want to take us out of the gate here? This will be from The Blood Kettle, which will be appearing in Mid-American Review, yes?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Danielle. I'll read a few early scenes from my short story, The Blood Kettle. So it starts about a page in, and then it follows the main character, Zsófi, who is teaching in southern Hungary English and is from Wisconsin. Okay. Erzsébet had invited me to her family's pig slaughter yesterday during breakfast, as the kids passed baskets of bread in the cafeteria. I swept poppy seeds off the first grade table and thanked her too many times. I'd love to come, I said, the seeds pooled in my palm. It's nothing special, but you keep hinting about how you want to go to one. The other teachers are starting to feel guilty, she shrugged in her bulky wool sweater. I'll make muffins. Blueberry? Apricot? I promised. I felt intrepid, like the version of myself I had come to Hungary to be. Whatever, Erzsébet said. I'll have my nephew pick you up, 4 a.m. She wandered to the 8th grade corner to eat the crust left on her daughter's plate. I baked past midnight, pretending not to see the gentle messages from my mom, finding new ways to ask if I was all right. I knew they meant that as snow softened in Wisconsin, she was remembering a year ago, when my pregnancy ended and spring began. A continent away, she knew I was thinking of it too. In the distance, 2 pinpricks of light flickered against the town's empty bar and closed bakery, the leafless trees, and the dormant fields. A Soviet-era Travy sped towards the school, the horn echoing through the sleeping streets. Key Bensei? I asked, opening the boxy car door. He nodded without looking up, spreading loose tobacco across cigarette paper on his leg. He looked a few years younger than me, in his mid-20s, and vaguely familiar, though we had never met. His knit hat crept up the back of his head, and the exposed skin looked phosphorescent in the pre-dawn light. Zsófi, he said, telling me my name. It still surprised me to hear people pronounce it without stumbling, the name my Hungarian father chose but never used. Jó reggelt, I said, wishing Bensei a good morning in the bright tone I used with my students. He rolled the cigarette between his fingers and licked the paper's edge. Get in. His English flexed with confidence, driving towards his grandparents' house 20 minutes away and just shy of the Croatian border, where Erzsébet and the pigs were waiting. Good, I'd almost run out of Hungarian, I said, jabbing my seatbelt into the broken fastener before letting it slide through my hand. It wasn't true, but I wanted to make him laugh. My mom had insisted I study the language as a kid, slogging through lessons beside me. Bensei lit the cigarette and pulled away, bobbing his head to a Hungarian metal band, running the town's only stop sign. He rolled his shoulder blades up and back, making the pins covering his denim vest collide, a silhouette of Che Guevara and Keep Hungry Hungarian, the mythic 2-roll birds nationalists co-opted for profile pictures, and the logo for the neo-fascists gaining seats in parliament. They opposed immigrants of all kinds, but I wasn't the kind of foreigner who got attacked on the Budapest subway. My blonde hair and blue eyes insulated me. I've been in your flat, Bensei said. What? I said. He turned on the music and the screaming punks hummed. I've been in your flat. He stretched each word like I'd heard so many Wisconsinites do to someone with an accent. You know, where you sleep? No, I said. I think I'd remember having you over. Once I'd invited the maintenance worker inside when the washing machine leaked a pond in the kitchen. That was it. Bensei smirked. When I was in high school, he said, have you heard about Paul? Paul was the old American English teacher, and he could party. He used to have all of us over to pregame. So much beer pong. Great guy. He sounds great, I said. Best English teacher this town has ever had, Bensei said. Noted. We entered another village with its own bus stop, bar, and bakery. He drove with his knee while he rolled a second cigarette and sucked on the first. What do you do? I asked. What do you do? I love that phrase, so Western, so capitalist. A real Hungarian would never say that. We're not obsessed with jobs, salaries, money. We ask, who are you? What do you stand for? I'd never heard a Hungarian ask any such thing. My mistake, I said. Who are you? A working man, he said, an entrepreneur. He delivered for a paprika factory, worked the sunflower harvest, and sold protein powder to weightlifters online, though his scrawny figure did not bode well. I can get you a discount, he said. I thought you might be a translator, I said. Other than his Aunt Erzsébet, I never heard locals speak English this fluently. I'm not here to help the imperialists, he scoffed. In the 90s, when Yugoslavia was dissolving and NATO forces were everywhere, Erzsébet said translating was good money. That's how she met her husband, a Marine from Baltimore I met once before he redeployed to Afghanistan. Now those jobs were in Budapest. So this is your idea of fun, Bensei said, to watch an animal die? A dozen soda cans, not quite empty, ricocheted in the back seat. At the moment, it felt unbearable. I had never seen anything die. It's an important tradition, right? When your aunt asked, I didn't think I should pass up the chance. I see, Bensei said. What do you see? We're souvenirs to you, he said. I didn't mean it like that, I said, but maybe I did. I considered telling him about the pictures that still hung by my bedside of my father at a Disneyvagash wearing sausage links like a scarf. It was taken years before he and my mom met in a UW-Madison math class, before she got pregnant and a semi collided into him near a dive bar with deals for international students. But I wasn't about to exchange my loss as currency. The windows shook with bass. You've got to see these guys live sometime. They just came to Page. Cool show. He nudged me on the knee, like the whole conversation had been a joke we shared. At a stop sign, a streetlight shone on his face, lighting a craggy-edged birthmark on his temple that bled purple under his brow. I realized that I did know Bensei, that I'd been remembering his face for months. I think I'll stop there.
Super. Thanks, Danielle. So first of all, one of my questions after reading this and hearing you read, have you spent time in Hungary? Was this drawn on some personal experiences, any of that stuff?
Yeah, I was a teacher in Hungary shortly after I graduated from college. I'm from Wisconsin. I have blonde hair and light eyes. But I taught for a year in southern Hungary in a very small town close to the Croatian border, and certainly drew on that. And also did attend a Disznóvagás, which is like the kind of traditional festive Hungarian pig slaughter. Although in many ways, like there are many differences in the story, and my experience was quite different from this one.
Just as a reader and from an editorial point of view, I feel like there are a lot of, it's always such a rich thing to draw on, that kind of fish out of water, that American abroad, observing culture from not quite within it point of view, and it's always fascinating to read about for the rest of us, because I mean it's new stuff, we don't know that, and all I know about Hungary myself is Major is hard. I had no chance. So what else can you tell us? What else are you working on? Do you have plans for the summer, or is your work appearing somewhere we should watch for it soon?
Well, I'm told this story will appear in an issue of Mid-American Review soon. So I'm a PhD student at UW Milwaukee. So I'm in my finals week and slogging away at that. I primarily write creative nonfiction. So this story was kind of a big deal for me because it's the first short story I've written. I did once publish an essay that was an essay, but it got published as fiction. So I think I've never known whether to count that. I always thought that was sort of a cheat. This was sort of like opening the gates of trying out a new form for me. I really like writing fiction, but I primarily write personal essays and creative nonfiction. So this summer, I'm going into my third year of my PhD program, which is the time when I will do prelims and exams. So I've got a big old list of 100 books that I need to gain some expertise on and be able to have some authority to speak on or write on in a couple of months. So I'll be doing that and continuing to write. So hopefully some more short stories and nonfiction. I just had an essay published in Diagram about my 2-year-old during the pandemic, which I loved, and I love that journal. So that's what I'm up to.
Well, I think it's really cool kind of getting into that blurry line between fiction and creative non, and it's interesting to hear you say that you had an essay that was nonfiction but was published as fiction, and it gets fuzzy, doesn't it, people?
Yeah, I thought about contacting the editors on that one and being like, actually, I think you should change the heading on this. But then I thought, well, and, maybe once it's in the world and in a reader's hands, those lines are fluid, and that's fine. So yeah, thanks so much.
And then we have, certainly so many magazines publish works as just prose, and many times they don't even tell us whether it's fiction or non, and we kind of just have to encounter these pieces and place ourselves with them. I think it's cool that we have an assortment of fiction and creative non and poetry and everything today. Maybe that's a segue. Emily Standlee, if you're ready next. This is from your essay, I Never See Her Anymore, which this will be coming out from Tampa Review soon. If I'm right? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for putting this on. I'm excited to see it out there in the world. It's about my cousin, who is from Arkansas, and it's kind of an abridged version of the essay. They had been out driving on the mountain that day, Katie and Frank, the boyfriend. My extended family have never called it by its given name, Pension Mountain, because they've owned land up there for years. The terrain is flecked with evidence of us: deer stands, cabins, fences, bridges, headstones. I used to drive around with all 3 cousins and my brother, Eddie, in my early 20s, those roads twisting into nothingness at night, cans of beer and plastic vodka bottles rolling at our feet. Whoever drove was sober, that much we got right. Since we were from the city and didn't hunt or fish, my cousins made good-natured fun of us. Marie was the worst and the youngest. She sped off once while I squatted to pee on the side of the road, threatening to leave me out there in the dark. It was a wonder we never sailed off a cliff, despite the elevation topping out at less than 2,000 feet. Elsewhere, this would be considered a big hill. It's an old mountain, though, and a spooky one. I've never hiked the whole thing. It would be easy to get lost up there among the pines. They'd been driving and fighting, most likely. The exact details of that day have never been shared with me. In any case, Katie jumped out of the truck and took off walking down Pension Mountain. Prior to this, she'd left the facility in Springfield soon after the mandatory week-long hold had expired. She'd returned to Berryville, and we all wondered if the forced detox she'd recently faced would stick. A woman picked her up on the side of a gravel road, took her to her parents' house. Everybody knows everybody in Berryville. Still on the mountain, Frank panicked and called the family. He didn't know Katie had been picked up, so he headed into town. They fought a lot, Marlena says. She'd been dropped off already. Marlena and Marie, the sisters, plus Frank and Matt and Denise, the parents, were all standing in the side yard, which is gated off from the main house. For as long as I can remember, we've always parked cars there in the grass. A chicken house turned storage unit sits to the north. Somehow, Katie ended up in a truck. She was inside one of the vehicles parked there in the midst of everybody. She had a shotgun. On the way up the truck steps, she managed to literally kick her mom, my aunt, out of the way. She tried to run over her mom. I'd been intimidated by Denise my whole life. She's a high school principal. She was out of her mind, Marlena tells me. Marie recorded everything. In the footage, Katie sits and stares. 1 minute she's slumped over, the next she's sitting straight up as if electrocuted, but her eyes never change. I'd grown up with this person. I'd seen the spectrum of her emotions firsthand, but now nothing. The face I see holds no expression. Nobody knew what to do. The women begged her to get out, their voices cracking in the still air. Frank and Matt threw a log through the window of the truck, shattering the glass. Katie either sat quietly or cried out, her screams bouncing off nearby buildings. The police came. She refused to be taken in unless it was with me, Marlena says. Cops escorted them to the nearest hospital, where Katie was strapped to a table. We pretend we're in the nail salon. Katie is always the nail technician. My aunt and uncle have a square pass-through window that looks out from the kitchen to a hallway leading off the living room. Katie perches on a high stool in the hallway, her nail polish collection vast and astounding to me at 8 years old. Marlena and I sit on the countertops in the kitchen. They round off at one end so we can put the pink plastic cash register there. We must pay for our manicures and coins, but Katie gives us discounts. Uncle Matt comes in from work at the Tyson factory, the door slapping behind him in the fall air. "What are y'all doing?" he asks, half grinning. "Get off the countertops." We slide off, our game disrupted. Half an hour later, we're back on the countertops, and Matt is in his favorite leather chair watching Razorback football. This is just the way it goes. It's familiar to me, safe. We don't fight. We don't chase one another. We're quiet, doing nails, making soft conversation. We might get in trouble, but our parents and aunts and uncles are too stressed or happy or both to care about children's mischief, and we're too full of youth's invincibility to really mind them anyway. After Katie was taken to a Berryville hospital via police escort, her doctors decided she should spend some time in a real rehabilitation center. Strictly forced isolation in the rubber room of a psychiatric hospital wasn't going to work. She was unstable, sure, because of the drugs. That shit, though, probably not. When she got to the facility in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where she refused contact with family, her doctors told us she'd been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She required some type of medication, again, which seemed odd to us then, like a step in the wrong direction. What can be said about BPD exactly? I have a friend who was diagnosed a few years back. Chronically, she will hatch plans to move across the country, untether herself from the current reality. She once started a GoFundMe page in the name of escape, but these visions never pan out. When she told me her mom was also symptomatic, I recalled the time she'd been forced, in some bizarre attempt at mother-daughter boundaries that never existed in the first place, to sleep in a tent in the family's backyard. Now, I wonder how much of her mom's behavior had to do with her own childhood trauma, since one characteristic exhibited by many people with BPD is this debilitating fear of abandonment. Yet they push people away. Katie was pushing her family away. How much is passed down from woman to woman, and as a result, how do these women move back and forth between the world that exists and the one they've created? Borderline between what and what? Winona Ryder's character asked her psychiatrist, and Girl interrupted. Katie and her mom got along fine, from what I had seen, but somewhere along the line, the chain of familial security had been broken. It was very obvious to all of us she needed to talk to someone. But were her highs and lows symptoms of BPD, or could they be blamed on the drugs? Katie's understanding of action and consequence was in a constant state of flux. She held tightly to whatever made her feel stable, even if stability meant ingesting a potentially lethal quantity of narcotics. On the Tuesday after the turn of the new year, Katie had stopped answering her phone. Marlena remembers texting her throughout the day to no avail. She didn't know anything was wrong until she and Ray drove out to the shop house. Frank was out of town. He'd been sent elsewhere for the pipeline. He was never there, it seemed. They walked in and found Katie lying in the space between the refrigerator and the kitchen island. She was on her side as if she'd been rolled over. The cops were called, and they located her cell phone. A woman whose name I forget and whom Marlena barely knew at the time had tried to call Katie over and over that day like she suspected some wrongdoing. Had she been with Katie when she overdosed? Had this random woman rolled her over in a failed attempt to save her life? The police found no actual drugs in the shop house, but there were syringes in the bathroom sink, tourniquets, and spoons on the kitchen island. We'd never known Katie to shoot up before. Had a stranger tempted her to do so, or at the very least provided her with the means and supplies? And why had she disappeared? Now I remember two things distinctly. My dad calling to tell me they'd found her, that she'd passed away, and me screaming, "I just saw her," into the phone. And the wording Denise used the moment Eddie and I arrived at her house for the weekend of the funeral. "I'm happy to see you. I'm sorry it's because of this." I was sorry too. I was confused. Marlena sat me down on a bed in her parents' house to discuss the night Katie died. She hadn't been sleeping because Katie kept appearing over and over in her dreams. She'd wake up crying. Alternatively, she'd wake up screaming. Do siblings of the deceased usually see the deceased in their dreams? I had a haunted feeling. Denise wished Katie would visit her in the midst of sleep. She relayed this thought to me many times. I had my own set of unexpected problems. It had been a long time since I'd seen anybody in a casket, and seeing Katie lying there looking like her but not like her fucked me up. My then boyfriend had a leftover Halloween wig that sat on the bookshelf in his parents' basement, and it was bleached just like Katie's hair. For months after the funeral, I couldn't walk from his bedroom to the bathroom without peeking over at it. Sometimes I walked into the room and purposely kept my eyes trained on the opposite wall. It reminded me too much of her hair in that casket. Though her family and friends had tried to make her look normal in death, her hair looked nothing like it had in life. I don't tell Marlena any of this. We're approaching the end of our conversation. If you need anything else from me, let me know, she says, as if we just concluded some kind of business deal. I appreciate what you said, I say. I understand. It's easier for her to end on a superficial note. If she didn't, those nights of waking up screaming would repeat themselves. She'd lived with her sister's death every day, as my dad said, and she'd continued to do so. But if she let her grief get too big, she'd give it power. She'd give the disease, the circumstance, whatever it is, too much power. I jot something down in my notebook. She knows where grief can take her and where it can't. I never see her anymore, Marlena tells me. She's been quiet for a minute, contemplative. I haven't heard her become too emotional, but I'm not surprised. It's been almost 5 years after all. The lights flicker in my apartment. We're kids. At the gate in the side yard on my way back home, I hug Katie and her tooth falls out. We look down in shock to see where it's fallen, mouths agape. She never lets me forget this moment because it's ridiculous, and I feel horrible afterwards, like I've hurt her. She laughs about it though. She was so annoyed by the tooth and couldn't wait for it to be gone.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. A powerful piece there.
Thank you.
So one thing I was thinking about this, this is Creative Non here. You're obviously, kind of doing some important work processing this, all of these events here. And I'm thinking about this as I've been teaching more Creative Non lately too. This is interesting where in places you're reporting specifically what you know, and then kind of getting into more speculative. how things may have happened. Can you tell us some about that process where you were kind of alternating between reporting what you knew for sure and then kind of edging into that unknown space?
Yeah, I mean, luckily for me, my extended family, my aunt and uncle, my cousins especially, they were all really open-minded about like this project happening, and they didn't have to be, you know. They were the ones witnessing that firsthand. Like I am sort of a secondary perspective or like a conduit or something. I don't know. I had those same thoughts, like there's an event that happens and then there's like the people actually seeing the thing, and then there's the person writing about it sort of in the middle, trying to maybe not project their own like experience with addiction or their own emotion onto the piece too much. And then there's like at the end the ultimate, you know, story that comes out of all of it. So it's like there's so much room in that for things to get lost in translation, I think. So I tried really hard not to, like, I tried hard to avoid doing that with this. Like my cousin Marlena, she was on the phone with me the whole time, sort of walking me through what had happened, because this was like 5 years ago. And it's even like strange to think about what she recalls and what we all recall in nonfiction when we're trying to, you know, create a narrative. I guess create sort of the wrong word, like remember a narrative in our heads. You know, like what fills in the gaps between what you're trying to forget or what actually ends up on the page. So I guess, I don't know, that like transformation, I think sort of keeps me accountable, or maybe keeps us all accountable as nonfiction writers, like really having that in our heads of, is this good? Like, is this morally correct? Like, is it emotionally, like, if this is published, you know, will it damage anyone? You know, so those were the things I was thinking to get over that.
Yeah, that's hard. All this idea of objective truth and all these filters we have to go through. Well, great job with it. It's a great piece. Anybody else have any questions you wanted to throw out for Emily while we're here? Cool. Well, Emily, anything you'd like to tell us fast about what else you have going on, what else you're working on, anything like that?
I've been working on poetry. I had a couple essays get picked up though in the last couple of months, and some flash pieces, but next semester I'll be back to nonfiction. So I'm excited about that, and writing a thesis. And I guess the thesis is going to consist of poems and nonfiction. So I don't know how I'm going to pull that off, but if you have any suggestions, let me know.
Well, we could go down a long rabbit hole there about whether poetry is nonfiction itself and who is the speaker. Yeah, things, stories, right?
Yes.
Cool. Well, good luck with that. Thanks for being here. Up next, we have Steve Vineis. And Steve's going to read from his story Pump Jack, which is coming out in Hayden's Ferry Review. Yeah?
Yes, it is. Hi, everybody. People often ask me about this story, what a pump jack is. A pump jack, you ever seen one of those little toys where the bird dips its beak in the glass of water? If you go on an oil well, when there's not enough bottom pressure, the pump jack forces the oil upward. So read into that what you will. We'll read the first couple pages, and yeah, thank you. Pump jack. Sharky kept the bindles in the registered. I'd given up the stuff, but there was still a prowling in me that sometimes yearned for the chaotic euphoria of it. I stuck to beer and sat in my usual place. It was late and crowded, so I knew the knocking would start soon. 3 raps on the bar top, and Sharky would fix his eyes on you and note the cash you laid down. The register sat near the icebox full of buds with its drawer always open. Sharky would knuckle a bag in his pinky and set it down with the beer and scoop up the money in a motion so fluid it was like a magic trick. If he didn't know you or wanted to save some of the goods for the rest of the evening, he'd give you a beer and your change in signals and Kennedy coins. I call him Matt when we're alone. He said he never liked the connotation of that name. It's something people walk on. We've been close as brothers since his real one died some years ago, running his truck off the road dead sober but exhausted when the company put him on a triple shift. The union came down hard on his brother's company, and Sharky got a good sum out of it. He bought the bar, and I helped him with the licenses and paperwork. He's tough, and I'm smart. That's the way it's been since we met in high school. Sharky's is a local bar. If not for the cars parked crooked all around it at night, one might mistake it for just another business that failed. There's little to Oil City now. We're 10 years behind the rest of Pennsylvania. Sharky's is a refuge. People come here when things are good or bad or someplace in between. Lately, I'd been wondering why it'd been so long since I felt any way at all. I drank my buds and I listened to the knocks and I watched the score change on the television above me. The Steelers were winning and the bar was getting louder, and the knocks were getting closer until I felt like I was holding up commerce just being there. I didn't want to leave. I glanced an ashtray a few spots away with a Marlboro Light still burning, half smoked. There was lipstick on the filter, so I felt a bit better about taking it. I'd been quit 3 months. Sharky dropped a pack of Reds in front of me and leaned on the bar. Don't let me see you do that again. You ain't a bum. Thanks. $6. I'm going to put it on my tab. All right. Sharky kept a small steno notebook and golf pencil in his shirt pocket, and he mimed making a note upon the paper. He put the pad back and chewed the pencil and nodded at me. Won't be long before those will start to kill you. That's the idea. You tried chew? Never. Might help you quit the smokes. And carry around a drool cup with me all the time. There'll be plenty of that when I get emphysema. I tapped my pockets. I was ill-equipped for this night. Toss me some matches. Plumb out. You always have matches. I had to send the last batch back. Why? They put a martini glass on the fucking things, and they were red. Sharky slid me a bottle down the bar, and the night continued. I watched cheerleaders in their spandex, and they made me think of my wife. She runs a gymnastics academy, and her body is sculpted, but her flesh is soft. She has muscles in places I've never felt on a woman, and she bends like she has rubber bones. Meanwhile, my belt buckle pinches my gut when I lean too far forward on the bar. The Steelers won, and the jubilation in the room and the incessant knocking and Sharky's good mood had me loose. Someone left behind a white Bic, so I wiped it. I thought about how tomorrow was my Saturday to cook breakfast. I smoked thinking of how neither one of my children could ever just have the same fucking pancakes. She liked blueberries and he liked chocolate chips, which meant making the whole meal twice. It was getting a little too warm in the bar from all the people, and I lost my usual place to some burly stranger, so I leaned near the door where the cool air came in. I left my coat in the truck, thinking I wouldn't be here long. People piling in were brushing a dust of snow off their coats. I lingered for a while until Sharky started on one of his black cigars. The smell blanketed the room and made me sick to my stomach. I heard my name being called at the bar, but I went out into the night. Each breath I took was heavy and burned. In the parking lot of mostly trucks, a lone blue hatchback idled. Its back wipers squeaked back and forth. The car had a row of stickers on the bumper I recognized. Faculty parking passes from where I used to teach. They were gradually more legible from left to right. An oil derrick over a year above the letters FCTY. I'd taken mine off with a razor when I quit. I tried to will the car to leave by staring at it a while. It'd been an ugly scene when I got fired from the school. The school board had gotten complaints about my methods. I treated the kids as near adults. I strayed from the curriculum the board wanted me to teach. They wanted good scores on tests. I wanted my students asking questions. I liked to wear jeans with no belt. I'd have to let the school fire me if I'd known quitting shot my chances of collecting unemployment. They tried to get me to reconsider my resignation, but I fought them, submitting it twice. The second time directly to the superintendent. My wife always says I never know when someone's doing me a favor. Now it's her money I drink on, but she makes plenty running her academy. I do the laundry, dishes, handle the kids. Her job keeps our house. My check was just extra for incidentals and going out occasionally. I had a teacher ID card with my picture on it that got me discounts, and the school made me give that back. It's not like I slayed the goose just to overcook its golden eggs. My wife asked me if I look for work. I tell her there's only one other school, and it's run by the same folks. She says if I could find something else then. I tell her we're saving on daycare. She goes upstairs defeated, and I go out feeling the same. I'm too good for Sharky's place and these people with their real problems, and I know it, which is why I come. Sharky had set out a line of shots, and I was shivering from being outside so long with my sleeves rolled up, I took one. It was getting near close, and the snow was really coming down. I wouldn't be going home, too far on rough roads. Sharky took his stool and pointed the remote at the television, and our drowsy eyes were filled with Letterman and infomercials and news programs and a Jeopardy repeat before Sharky cut the television off. We all drank in the warm quiet. The bar phone rang, and I knew who it was by the way the receiver rattled on the base. Sharky plucked the phone up and put it to his ear without uttering a greeting. I could hear my wife, not yelling, just speaking, and Sharky's eyes flicked at mine. I shook my head. He listened for a while and said something softly into the receiver before he hung up. Thanks. She the type to check hospitals? Someone asked. She just did. Sharky shook his head and yawned. The other patrons slapped money on the bar and left into the cold night. Sharky opened the register and took out a handful of bills but didn't flick through them. It was as if he could tell the amount by the weight. I leaned a little too far on one ass cheek trying to get my wallet and nearly fell off my stool. Sleeping back, Sharky said. He was watching me in the mirror behind the liquor bottles with their metal spouts shaped like horns. Space heater is shot, but I got a mess of blankets. Thanks. He slid me a spare key. I was familiar with the room and back. Sharky had an old computer and a dot matrix printer on a desk next to a cot. I don't think he ever used it, as both machines always had dust covers on them. There were some skids of beer and some kegs that were left over from when the place still had taps. A box of items found at the bar, combs, keys, cards, pantyhose, lipstick tubes, jackets, a metal dildo with Jesus carved into the shaft. Sharky liked to show that one off. It was rare I got this drunk, and he knew where I lived. It wasn't an easy drive. He put on his long black coat and went out the door as I stumbled behind the bar, gripping anything bolted down. I fell upon the cot and turned in the blankets and was immediately sweaty, so I shucked off my boots and pants. The salty taste of my upper lip made me think of tequila, of my honeymoon in the Bahamas, how my wife barely ate over that week because all the food there was too spicy for her. I love her so much I try to spare her from me when I'm like this. I heard pounding at the back door. I closed my eyes against the sound until I heard Sharky's voice. Get out here, he called. We got a problem. I guess I'm going to stop there. Let you pick up Hayden's Ferry review to read the rest.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's a great story. I got to read the whole thing. You all should. So, and you read it well too. That was great to listen to. So I feel like I see a lot of like dive bar stories, and I think they're hard to do well. I think this one works well. Anything you can tell us about that?
Well, I spent a lot of my early 20s in dive bars, so this actually it doesn't really have a basis in truth, but the place, the bar, is one that I have local to me, and I gave up drinking years ago, but it's still a place I like to hang out, and it's just kind of like it's ingrained in me. My band's played shows there. I've spent a lot of nights there, so it's just, you're right, dive bar stories are a dime a dozen, but there's a lot of material there. I think Larry Brown said that. He always said there's a lot of material if you just listen, and you kind of just make up your own background to the people that you're seeing. And I guess that's what I tried to do there. I don't know if I executed it perfectly, but that's a dive bar story.
I thought it was working, and I suspect we all have our own kind of local dive bar that we're projecting that onto, but people have stories in those, man. Yeah, you're right. So yeah. Cool. Hey, anybody else have questions for Steve while we're here? Well, Steve, hey, what can you tell us? What else are you working on? What's going on?
Well, I actually joined the MFA program about 10 years after I left the BFA program at the same school. So I've collected quite a few manuscripts over the years, and since I've been enrolled and back around people who love literature, it's consumed me. So shopping 2 books around, I usually work like only in long form. This was the first short story I wrote in a really in years, and it was rejected by my own school's imprints, both of them, and I loved it. I was so it just shows you the subjectivity of the game. But yeah, so for me, it's a lot of long waiting periods to hear back from agents who eventually just send a form letter. But got to keep fighting.
I know what those form letters say. I know how that is. Yeah. I know that too well. But I think we all know how that is to just, we send things out there and wait, right?
Right.
So it's cool when things hit now and then.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, the story, it'll be out in Hayden's Ferry, and yeah.
Yeah.
Got to check out the whole thing, find it there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here, Steve. So up next, Hee Lee, your poem "Would I Rather Soften" is forthcoming in Mid-American Review. All you.
Hello. Yeah, I'll be reading a very short poem. It's called "Would I Rather Soften." Yeah. Would I rather soften? The way a cup of black tea is easily changed by milk or light. The way soybeans are left to soak until they bloat, blended until they are broken down into paste and pressed into a brittle clump of tofu. The way a drumstick is forgotten at the back of a fridge, and months turn muscle into a fuzzy forest of mold. You can't choose when grief will meet your heart sore. But as a child, when I asked my mother why the pillbug rolled into a solitary planet when I was afraid, she suggested we practice softness, listen to what it had to say. And this too didn't leave us unscathed.
Thank you, Hee. Well, I'll just go with the open-ended question there. What can you tell us backstory? What's going on behind this poem? Any setup or explanation you can expand for us?
Yeah, it actually surfaced from my childhood. I was a curious child, and I would ask my mom why all the time. Like, why the clouds are white? Why does the pillbug do this? I would ask why all the time. And in the beginning, like she would answer very gracefully. She would explain everything, but to a point, it got to a point where she was busy sometimes, and she realized that these questions didn't end. So she came up with this answer where she would say, we can ask the pillbug, we can ask the cloud, and then she would have me run off and try to like figure things out by myself. So I guess I got that scene first for this poem, and then I started thinking a lot about listening and softness, and how I kind of wanted to challenge how softness is associated with weakness and passivity, something that people take advantage of, right? So I thought of different ways that softness was present in our lives and how it was of like consequence, and it was something that could change things and lives. And so the poem came from that. Yeah.
Well, it's a great poem. Thanks for reading it. Congrats. Yeah, that was I have kids too, and I can relate to that from your mother's point of view. Just the questions, all the questions, right? But that sounds like a clever angle on her part. And it sounds like you are still asking questions about, the interesting, the important things. So that's fantastic. What else are you working on? What's next for you?
Yeah, it's actually been a really busy year for me. My chapbook, Dear Bear, was just published by Platypus Press last month, and then I I was told that my my other chapbook was just picked up by Bull City Press and it's coming out this fall. So I've been just working with the editors to prepare for publication. So yeah,
Fantastic.
I'm very
Congrats.
grateful. Thank you.
Just to make sure we get the plug in there for the video. So if I heard that was Dear Bear from Platypus, newly out, and tell us, Bull City is the other one.
Bull City Press, and the title is Connotory. It's a made-up word that I picked up from merging dictionary and connotation. So it's a dictionary that tells you definitions by connotation. So it's not really, yeah.
Cool. So that's forthcoming in the fall then, yeah.
Yeah.
And this poem, the one that you read for us, that's coming out in Mid-American Review soon, yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't know when it's coming out, but it's coming.
Super. Well, fantastic. Thanks for being here. We have one more reader queued up tonight. Jonathan Winston Jones is going to read from his creative nonfiction Gift, and this will be appearing in Quarterly West, right?
Yes, it will be appearing in Quarterly West. So I'll begin. And my essay begins with a quote by anarchist feminist Emma Goldman. In her memoir, Living My Life, Emma Goldman says, quote, "I was saved from utter despair by my interest in the Haymarket events," end quote. During a hot summer of coronavirus and civil discontent, I sprint miles to the grave of Emma Goldman, the anarchist feminist of early 20th century America. She rests alongside the Haymarket martyrs, 5 Chicago labor activists who were executed for their fight for the 8-hour workday. In the industrializing adolescence of the United States, working class anarchism ignited the labor movement. Goldman and the Haymarket martyrs are buried in a cemetery perched above the Eisenhower Freeway. Motorists in gridlock lurch toward the towers of downtown Chicago. In the heat, the glassy skyscrapers shimmer like a mirage. No great shade tree graces the working class anarchist section of this cemetery. I stand at Goldman's tall gravestone. I notice a few red roses resting at the base. She loved roses. As a garment worker in New York, she stepped into her boss's office to ask for a raise. She noticed on his desk a sumptuous bouquet of American beauties and said to him that the roses cost the same amount as half of her week's wages. In response, her boss told her that she had rather extravagant tastes for a factory girl. At the base of Goldman's gravestone, next to the red roses, is a bottle of whiskey and many pebbles, the pebbles of Jewish custom for remembering the dead. I have nothing to offer except for my face mask. I'll be back with something, I tell her. I pause at her grave and remember how I met her. As the hot summer of coronavirus and civil discontent ripens, I run to Emma's grave. As I run, I ask myself what I recall of reading Emma Goldman's memoir, Living My Life as a Senior in High School. Well, I remember her snark, her energetic organizing. Dancing was a part of revolution in her eyes. She would have loved disco. She writes in her memoir that she was, at the dances, one of the most untiring and the gayest. I've since lost the 2 pastel volumes of Goldman's memoir that my sister Emily gave me for Christmas my senior year. One of the volumes, the blue one, disappeared in college when I was moving from dorm to dorm. The other volume, the purple one, disappeared when I was on my way out of the United States to England for a Fulbright to study human rights. Though my sister Emily did not score high marks in terms of being a so-called role model, Emma sat with me on the lonely, dark mornings in that last year at home. We huddled under a blanket by the cast iron register of my bedroom, and I escaped into her life. Reading Emma's memoir, I felt as though I could hear her voice, ardent and cheerful, telling me stories about her traveling around the country, her organizing, her many lectures on anarchism and labor rights to audiences of workers dispossessed in the boom-bust dance of laissez-faire global capitalism. I remember her telling me about her many incarcerations, like the time when she was in jail in Buffalo, New York, and received hate mail saying, "You damn anarchist, I wish I could get at you. I'd tear out your heart and I'd feed it to my dog." But at the beginning of America's first Gilded Age, the immigrant Emma Goldman was not a radical. She arrived from Russia in 1885 at age 16. She followed her older sisters to America, leaving behind an Orthodox Jewish father who had the year before thrown her French grammar into the fire and screamed, "Girls do not need to learn much. All a Jewish daughter needs to know is how to prepare gefilte fish, cut noodles fine, and give the man plenty of children." But Goldman was drawn to America, and her vision of America was idealistic. Arriving in New York Harbor with her sister Helena, she saw rising from the mist the Statue of Liberty, which she reflects on in her memoir. She writes, "Ah, there she was, the symbol of hope, of freedom, of opportunity. Liberty held her torch high to light the the way to the free country, the asylum for the oppressed of all lands. Our spirits were high, our eyes filled with tears." A stickler for facts, I asked myself, did Emma really see the Statue of Liberty in 1885, given that it wasn't actually completed until 1886? And I heard her reply to me that Liberty was under construction when she arrived. It always is. After Goldman landed in the United States, her idealism faded fast into long workdays at garment factories. Then the Haymarket Massacre transpired, and the implications for immigrants and immigrant workers haunted Goldman. On May 1st, 1886, a peaceful workers' strike for the 8-hour workday began in Haymarket Square in Chicago. On the evening of May 4th, Methodist preacher and anarchist Samuel Fielden was speaking to the demonstrators about why the laws of the land did not favor workers. Fielden's anarchism came from the conviction that the rule of law institutions promised by the United States were in fact captured by industrialist capitalist strongmen who would never allow labor to be fairly compensated. As Fielden spoke, a bomb exploded. Police advanced on the crowd in the square. Gunfire followed, and many died. 8 labor leaders, including Fielden, were arrested. in a climate of prejudice against foreign labor and opposition to the 8-hour workday, a sham trial ensued. Leaders August Spies, Adolf Fischer, Albert Parsons, Louis Ling, and George Engel were hanged. Of the 5, only Parsons, a white Southerner married to the daughter of a former slave, was American-born. In her memoir reflecting on her younger self's political awakening, Emma Goldman writes, "The newspapers called these men anarchists, bomb throwers. What is anarchism?" And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I love the way you cut between the personal and the historical in this overall piece. And I like the kind of setup question you gave me too. I can relate to that as a runner. When I can, I'm not run as much as I'd like to be, but what can you do, right? Sometimes you see places you wouldn't otherwise. You know, you can go out for a run and end up someplace you weren't expecting. What took you to Emma Goldman's grave in Forest Home Cemetery? Is that right? In the first place?
Yeah, so I guess during the lockdown and my partner and I not being able to really travel at all or see loved ones at all, my partner is a naturalized citizen from Honduras. And between the two of us, we were both missing our family, and we weren't even able to visit the graves of the ones we've loved and lost. So we just started going to visit Emma Goldman and the Haymarket Martyrs and what's called Radical Row in Forest Home Cemetery. And we still go and we pay our respects and we just listen. And it's been really healing.
Interesting. So yeah. The things the things we do in the last year or so, right? The way it like kind of breaks up our rituals and maybe opens up some new ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What else can you tell us about yeah, you know, what else you're working on? What's on the horizon for you? Yeah.
Well, I'm writing my thesis right now for Northwestern, where I'm in the MFA. I'm like 3/4 of the way done with it. It feels very stream of consciousness oriented. So we'll see how that goes. But that's what I'm working on.
I think I'll just say that as far as in creative non-stream of consciousness is kind of where it's at lately, you know, because we can take these kind of jump cuts in creative non that it's almost expected. We're looking to see how these things juxtapose with other things, you know. So yeah, I like that. I like the way you're putting things next to unexpected parallels there. So, well, hey, that's everybody. That's our reading for tonight. Thanks for logging in and tuning in, everybody. And for everybody out there watching, thank you too. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing all of these particular works out soon and much more from all of these writers. So thanks.